Huck didn't go on Becky's adventure. He stayed home and watched Injun Joe's house that night. At 11 o'clock Injun Joe and his friend came out and walked down the street. There was a box in his friend's hands. Huck said quietly, "Maybe that's the treasure box." He went after the two men. They walked to Mrs. Douglas's house and stopped in her yard. Huck stayed behind some small trees. The men talked, and Huck listened to them. Injun Joe was angry. "I want to kill her," he said to his friend. "Mr. Douglas was bad to me. He's dead now. But I remember. There are a lot of lights in the house. Her friends are visiting," Injun Joe's friend said. "We can come back tomorrow." "No," Injun Joe said. "Let's wait now." Huck liked Mrs. Douglas because she was always good to him. He wanted to help her. He quietly walked away and then he started to run to Mr. Jones's house. Mr. Jones opened the door. "What do you want?" he asked Huck. "Injun Joe and his friend are in Mrs. Douglas's yard," Huck said. "They want to kill her. Can you go there and help Mrs. Douglas?" "Yes. My sons and I can go there," Mr. Jones answered. "You can go home." In the morning, Huck went back to Mr. Jones's house. "How's Mrs. Douglas?" he asked. "She's okay," Mr. Jones answered. "The men went away because we arrived." "Good," Huck said. But he was afraid of Injun Joe. "Please don't say my name to Mrs. Douglas." Mr. Jones looked at him, and then he said, "You aren't well. Go and sleep in my bedroom." Later, Mrs. Douglas visited Mr. Jones. "You helped me yesterday night." "Thank you," she said. "You're a good man," Mr. Jones said. "We didn't know about the men in your yard. A boy was there and he wanted to help you. He came here, but I can't say his name." Mr. Jones and Mrs. Douglas went to church. People there talked about Tom and Becky. Mr. Jones and his sons went to the cave with the men. But on Monday morning they went home. Huck was in bed and was very sick. The men went back to the cave, but Mrs. Douglas stayed with Huck. Saturday, Tom and Becky walked and played in the cave. Then they stopped near some water. "What time is it?" Becky asked. "I don't know," Tom said. "Let's go back now." The two children walked and walked. But they didn't find the door to the cave. Becky was afraid. She wanted to sit down and eat. "Maybe they're looking for us now," she said. "Here's some food," Tom said. "Eat this and wait here. I'm going to look for the door." Tom walked and walked. But he didn't find the cave door. Suddenly, there was a man near him. Tom was afraid. But he stayed quiet. He looked at the man. It was Injun Joe. Tom was very afraid and he made a noise. Injun Joe went away quickly. Tom went back to Becky. But he didn't talk to her about Injun Joe. They were in the cave for 3 days. Tuesday, Becky didn't want to walk. Again Tom said, "Stay here. I'm going to look for the door." This time he went to a new place. There was light there. He went to the light. It came from a small door in the cave. Tom went out of the cave. Then he went back to Becky. "Come with me," he said. "We can go out of the cave now." Tom and Becky went out of the cave. They went to the river and waited there. Some men in a small boat came to them. Tom said, "We want to go home. Can you help us?" The men answered, "Yes. We can take you home." Tom and Becky went in the boat with the men. They arrived home very late Tuesday night. And people in the town were very happy. Tom talked all night about their adventure in the cave. Tom and Becky stayed home for many days. Then, 2 weeks after their adventure, Tom visited Becky and talked to her father. Mr. Thatcher said, "You're a very good boy, Tom. You helped Becky in the cave. Thank you. People can't go into it now, because it has a new big door. But Injun Joe's living in the cave," Tom said. Some men went down the river to the cave. Tom went with them. They opened the new door. Injun Joe was there, but he was dead. Tom wanted to talk to Huck. Later in the week he went to Mr. Jones's house. The two boys talked about their adventures. "The money isn't in Injun Joe's house," Tom said. "It's in the cave." "I know, because Injun Joe was there. Let's get it." Huck was afraid. "But maybe we can't find it." "I can find it again," Tom said. "I know about a small door at the back of the cave. Becky and I came out there. We can go in that door, and I can find Injun Joe's treasure." "Okay," Huck said. "Let's go today." That afternoon the boys went in a small boat to the back of the cave. Tom walked first, and Huck went after him. They walked and walked. Then Tom said, "This is the right place. Injun Joe was here." The boys looked for a good place for treasure. Suddenly, Tom said, "Look. There's a cross." Injun Joe said, "Under the cross." "Let's look there." The boys went to the place with the cross. Tom said, "I'm going to dig here with my knife. Look. It's the treasure box. Let's get it out now. The treasure's ours." "This box is very heavy," Huck said. "We can't take it with us." "I have some small bags," Tom said. "We can put the money in them and take it home." The boys went out of the cave with the money. Tom said, "Let's take the money to the old house. Near Mrs. Douglas's house. That's a good place for it." They started to walk to the old house. Mr. Jones was in Mrs. Douglas's yard. He called to the boys. "A lot of people are waiting for you. Come with me," he said. They went into Mrs. Douglas's house. "Hello, boys," Mrs. Douglas said. "Come with me." Tom and Huck went with her to a bedroom. There were new shirts and jeans on the bed. "Wash your hands and faces and put on these shirts and jeans," Mrs. Douglas said. "Then come to the big room." The boys went to the room. A lot of people were there. Mrs. Douglas said, "First I want to say thank you to Mr. Jones and his sons. They helped me. They're very good people." "Huck helped, too," Mr. Jones said. "Thank you, too, Huck," Mrs. Douglas said. "You're a good. But Huck has a lot of money," Tom said. He went to the bedroom and came back with the bags of money. "We have this money from the cave. There's a lot of money in them, and it's ours now." There was $12,000 in the bags. The people were very surprised. They asked about the boy's adventure. "Boy, and I like you. I want to give you a home and some money." Huck lived in the big house with Mrs. Douglas. He was a new person. He washed every day. And he went to school and church. But he wasn't happy. He stayed there for 3 weeks, and then he ran away. Tom went to Huck. "Why did you run away?" Huck answered, "Mrs. Douglas is a good woman. I like her, but I can't live with her. I don't like washing every day. And I don't like going to school and church. I don't want to have a lot of money. But I want to be your friend. Okay?" "No," Tom said, "I can't be your friend. Because the boys at school don't want to play with you. We're thinking about a lot of new adventures. Please live with Mrs. Douglas and come to school." Then the boys at school can play with you. I want to be your friend, Huck said. And I want to have adventures with you and the boys at school. Maybe I can live with Mrs. Douglas. I don't know. But I'm going to try it again for a month. Good, Tom said. The boys are meeting later, at 12 o'clock at night. You can come, too. Good. Huck said.